It's been 2 weeks since we said Lukas Van Ness has been hitting the checkpoints on his way to a breakout season. But I'm ready to call it 2 weeks later. The breakout is here.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Lukas Van Ness is here. And 2 weeks ago, we led the show with, okay, it's the practices, the pads come on, things are going to change. Except things changed in ways that I think are even more unimaginable than I could have guessed. I saw one of the practices recently from Van Ness described as one of the most dominant training camp performances by anybody this season. And the Packers, who are loath to give us any insight into what's going on at practice, they don't let anyone on the beat take videos. You have to see grainy videos from fans in the stands, that sort of thing. But they posted a mic'd up of Lukas Van Ness. And I'm not going full body language doctor on you. Don't worry. There are 2 reps that they show. And of course, they're going to show the great reps. But there are 2 reps that I'm not sure I've ever seen from Van Ness. The kinds of moves he just didn't have in his pass rush bag. He hits Rasheed Walker with a hesitation crossover, filthy move. He goes inside, he goes outside. It's just, so he fakes the upfield rush, then comes back like he's going to inside counter, and then comes back out to the corner. It is outrageous for a guy 6'5", 275 to move like that against a left tackle that we know is a pretty good player, a pretty good pass protector. And on another rep, we don't know if it's earlier in practice or later in practice, he just hits straight up inside counter. Show upfield, plant that right foot in the ground, and come back inside. For someone who is a linear power rusher, to have that inside counter and to do it with explosion, like, it's one thing to do it. And I'm sure we've seen him do it, but I'm not sure we've seen him win with it. But the burst, the confidence to just go execute something like that, that's what is missing. And so you're seeing it in practice. We saw it at family night. Like when we said, I'm worried about Jordan Morgan, part of it was that he was getting worked by Lukas Van Ness. Well, if Lukas Van Ness is blowing by everybody and winning with not just power and speed to power, then all of a sudden our perception of what happened with Jordan Morgan has to change, because we saw Jordan Morgan in a preseason game against guys he doesn't face every day in practice, and he played great. Handled speed, handled power. So maybe what we're learning is that his reaction, or our reaction to his play against Lukas Van Ness, is really less about Jordan Morgan and more about the progress that Lukas Van Ness is making. Remember what Mike Smith said a couple years ago. And this is just like, the Packers have a type when it comes to pass rushers. But he said, give me a really talented guy who cares. He used some more colorful phrasing, let's say. And I can give you a good player. Now, I don't know how much of this is DeMarcus Covington, the new defensive line coach. I don't know. It's only been a couple months here that he's been in the building. But Barron Sorrell looks already like a more complete player than we saw at Texas. I don't think there's been that much time for me to give credit to DeMarcus Covington for that. I think that's offseason work. I think that's a credit to the player. But Jeff Hafley is also mixing up these fronts. You're seeing Lukas Van Ness as a stand-up defensive end. You're seeing him as an inside shade. You're seeing him as a 5 technique. You're seeing him move around the formation a little bit, which then makes it even harder to get a beat on what he's going to do as a pass rusher. If you're just going to line him up wide and let him try and run through someone's face every rep, it becomes very easy to block, even when you are as big and strong and powerful as a guy whose nickname is Hercules. Offensive linemen in the NFL, they're too good for you to try the same move over and over. But if all of a sudden you have these counters, if you can do these other things, that changes what your ceiling is. And I think it would be easy to forget. I know the Trey Hendrickson comp gets thrown out there a lot. I think it's unfair to put that on Lukas. But I think it's easy to forget that this guy, the year before he was drafted, so the year before the year that got him drafted in college, he played defensive tackle. And then he was a 4-3 defensive end. And then he was a 3-4 outside linebacker. And then he moved back to 4-3 defensive end last year. And now he's moving all over the formation, but he's got experience everywhere now. And he seems, and I don't know what work he's doing in the offseason. I don't know what the impact of someone like DeMarcus Covington has been, but it doesn't seem coincidental to me that you make this change and suddenly you're getting the best pass rush bag version of Barron Sorrell. I didn't see that bag, that reservoir of moves at Texas. He won with speed and technique, a little cross chop, one with speed to power, one with just pure bull rush. He won in a lot of different ways. And now Lukas Van Ness is more than, not just more than a bull rush player, much more. Now, this is a little bit like the comparison. I don't know why my brain always goes to this, but my comparison is always Vince Carter's jump shot. There was a period of time, especially in New Jersey, which is just dating me, where Vince Carter, who I'm sure a lot of you know as like the podcast host or something, he was one of the most ridiculous athletes in the NBA. And he still had a pretty silky jumper, pretty nice jumper. And he became a 3-point shooter, like a volume, good 3-point shooter later in his career. But he would fall in love with the jumper. And it was always like, Vince, just go to the rack. No one can stop you from getting to the rim. And even if they do, you can just dunk over them. I don't want Van Ness to feel like there's all this fancy stuff that he's got to do every rep. This is something you sprinkle in. His bread and butter is going to be power, speed to power. But the best players have counters. So, okay, here's the inside counter. I'm making you think I'm going upfield. You're going to set up that I'm going to bull rush you. I'm going to put my foot in the ground and I'm going to come back across your face and I'm going to explode getting up the field to the quarterback. Because it has to be done quickly. Left tackle, right tackle, doesn't matter. Those guys' feet, they're too quick. You have to be able to do it with alacrity. Okay, now you know I can go upfield shoulder, and then I can go upfield shoulder and work back inside. I can cross you over. Well, now what, Rasheed Walker? Now what can I do? Well, I can show you the counter. You go, oh, I know he can come back inside. Now I've got you leaning. You reach, I teach, and I'm back around the corner. And if you watch the rep, go to my social media, Peter_Bukowski, Peter Bukowski on Blue Sky, whatever you want. Watch the rep. Not only does he hit the crossover, what Kevin Durant might call the Hezzy Jimbo, he gets upfield with such burst after that. It's not just like, okay, I did the move, I won my rep, and now let me see where I am. Like, that was part of the issue at times with Rashawn Gary early in his career. He'd win his rep and then not know where the ball is. Same with Lukas Van Ness. He'd win his rep and then not know where the ball is. His ball awareness is so much better now. He won that rep and he is off. He is like a shot toward the quarterback. That player, that version of Lukas Van Ness, guys, that version of Lukas Van Ness can be a star. Can be a star. Speaking of a star, I felt like we haven't talked enough about Jordan Love this week. We're going to talk about Jordan Love and his superpower. We're going to do that next on Locked On Packers. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and Locked On Packers are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. They just keep getting better. Every year, you're just like, yep, this is the gold standard in fantasy football. That's just what it is. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, makes me feel old, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play Yahoo Fantasy football, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's just one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can stay and play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Jordan Love has two superpowers. He is one of the most effective quarterbacks in the NFL at creating big plays. And he is one of the most effective quarterbacks in the NFL at avoiding negative plays in the pocket. Let me tell you what I mean. Since Jordan Love took over, he leads the league in completions over 20 yards in the air. 59. So he's short 2 games in that time span, missed half of the Jaguars game, missed half of the Bears game. His first year as a starter in 2023, so that's part of the sample. He was his first year as a starter. Zach Tom was his first year as a starter. They had a platoon at left tackle, then a platoon at right guard. The youngest group of pass catchers in modern NFL history. 2 rookie tight ends were the starters. A rookie slot receiver was a starter. Their supposed number 1 receiver was hurt all year. Their number 1 running back was hurt most of the year. Their left tackle, their all-pro left tackle, was hurt all year. That was 2023. And then in 2024, they just happened to be the dropsiest team in the NFL. And Jordan Love still generated the most big-time downfield throws and catches in the NFL. He is a big game hunter. The reason his EPA stats look great, it's not because of Matt LaFleur, the scheme, really. It's that his approach to offense, wanting more. I want the big play. By the way, exactly what Aaron Rodgers always wanted. Aaron Rodgers always wanted the big play. Early in his career, remember how many sacks he would take? Because he was just holding the ball, waiting for the big play. Joe Burrow takes sacks because he's holding the ball, trying to make a big play. Here's the thing. Jordan Love doesn't do that. The last 2 years, the only quarterback in the NFL who is better at avoiding sacks is Josh Allen. Josh Allen gets sacked just over 10% of his pressures. That is a crazy number. 10% is a wild low number. Okay? Jordan Love is just a shade over that. He's second best in the NFL since he became the starter at avoiding sacks. Now, it's not just by a little margin either. And this is important. So Jordan Love, 13.5% of his pressures turn into sacks. So that's 1 in 7.5, 8. It rounds to 8, but it's like 7.68. It's whatever. That's a sack per that many pressures. Let me just give you a Baker Mayfield. Okay, Baker Mayfield has a 24% pressure to sack rate. What does that mean? Well, that's 1 in every 4 pressures turns into sacks. Almost twice as bad. And Baker Mayfield is one of the best offensive lines in the league. So this is offensive line agnostic in a way, because it's about how often you are sacked relative to how often you are pressured. So if you're pressured 50 times, we can still compare it to someone who is pressured, say, 20 times. The samples are different, and that's important, but you get to compare apples to oranges. Caleb Williams, for example, has a 32% pressure to sack rate. That means 1 in every 3 of his pressures turn into sacks. So if both of those guys face 10 pressures in a game, and they probably will face more, but let's just call it 10. Jordan Love will get sacked 1 and change times. Caleb Williams will get sacked 3 times and change. That difference is 2 drives potentially that you're just ending because you're taking a sack. Like, it is really hard. The data is clear on this. Your chance of scoring plummets when you take a sack, when you have a holding penalty. Those negative plays are drive killers. It is obvious, right? It seems intuitive. The data backs it up. So these all go hand in hand. Now, someone asked a good question on the socials, right? Is this the case that he's throwing the ball away? Well, no. In fact, Josh Allen, the guy who is the best at this in the NFL, throws the ball away more often than Jordan Love. 5.7% throwaway rate, I did the math, for Josh Allen over the last 2 seasons. He was the MVP and the MVP runner-up. Jordan Love, who's only marginally worse avoiding sacks when he's pressured, a 3.3% throwaway rate. And, as I've mentioned before, had the second best turnover-worthy play rate when pressured last year of the last decade of Packers football, which includes 2 Aaron Rodgers MVP seasons. So it's not like he's just hucking the ball up when he's pressured. By the way, Josh Allen has thrown a bunch of picks over the last 2 years too. Jordan Love didn't last year, didn't in 2023, threw more last year. So he's the best at creating big plays and is one of the best, if not the best, at avoiding the bad plays. That seems like, I don't know, the definition of a really good quarterback. I mean, I understand Aaron Rodgers is the all-time. Like, there will never be anyone. I mean, maybe at some point there will, just like the law of numbers, say at some point someone. But there has never been anyone like Aaron Rodgers. Positive play generation coupled with negative play avoidance. No one's ever done it. No one's ever done it like Aaron Rodgers. And Jordan Love is not on that level yet. But his ability to generate big plays is part of his DNA, and he does not have to sacrifice to do it. Remember the Baker Mayfield example. So Baker Mayfield had to throw a lot more last year than Jordan Love did. But when you look at those numbers and you go, okay, well, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, that has to matter. And then one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Do you guys know off the top of your head who led the NFL in interceptions last year? Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield. Now he threw 41 touchdowns, but he also threw 15 interceptions, or 16 interceptions, excuse me. So he created a lot of positive plays. 4,500 yards, completed 70% of his passes, 41 touchdowns, but takes sacks way more often than Jordan Love and throws more interceptions. You don't have the negative play avoidance in there. The definition of a good player is someone who creates a lot of good plays and avoids having bad plays. What else is there to talk about? I don't understand. Like, this is just obvious to me. By the way, Gardner Minshew threw 10 receptions in 10 starts last year. And Mason Rudolph threw 9 in 8 starts, which is just wild. Jameis Winston and Will Levis have more than Jordan Love in 12 starts compared to Jordan Love's 15 starts. That's why those guys are not in charge of their teams anymore. Speaking of not in charge, it's me when it comes to the offseason schedule. But David Bakhtiari doesn't think the offseason schedule makes sense from a player safety standpoint, and he's right. It doesn't. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, investments, properties. And when they don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization for your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. And you can plan goals with your partner, your spouse, your roommate. Get everything together so there's transparency. It's easier than ever to have that clarity. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use Locked On at monarchmoney.com. That's the code Locked On for half off your first year. 50% off that first year at monarchmoney.com with code Locked On NFL. And thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Bets. Betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rodgers have daily MLB locks and can't miss football futures. Find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So David Bakhtiari mentioned that he thinks one of the reasons why it seems, and I don't have the data on this, I was not able to find, it's much harder to find the training camp data. But there is a perception that players, and I think this is a fair perception, at training camp get hurt a lot, and players in the regular season rarely, if ever, seem to get hurt at practice. Now, of course, it does happen sometimes. But during the regular season, it seems like guys are not getting banged up in practice. It's usually in the games. But in training camp, it would be unusual for a day to go by where someone's not getting hurt in a practice. David Bakhtiari took to the Twitter machine. The problem is the amount of time to ramp up. There needs to be a longer ramp up period to acclimate the body. Pretty easy concept. Teams are just stubborn and refuse to acknowledge the truth. Okay. Let's go back to the conversation we had the other day about preseason games and playing in preseason games, and that the data showed very clearly playing preseason games helped you avoid injury precisely because of a ramp-up period. You prepare to play real games by playing less real games, and you prepare to play less real games by practicing, by scrimmaging, by having a family night, for example. But the problem with training camp is there's not really a ramp up to training camp. And what I have always wondered, it has never made sense to me, and by the way, I made this point, and David Bakhtiari was nice enough to give me a like on this. Maybe that means he agrees with me. Maybe he doesn't. I'm going to assume it does. And I'm going to take the win. But it has never made sense to me why mandatory minicamp is in the spring instead of right before training camp. Why are you doing installs in the spring and then training camp comes around where you're going to do more installs and there's a 6-week break in between? How does that make any sense? You kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I don't know why you want to kill birds, but you do that by moving mandatory minicamp to right before training camp. And it gives you the same break. You're just moving a practice that already happens. Take those practices that happen in the spring and move them to right before training camp, and it's the same. It's just when they're happening. Now, Bakhtiari's insistence is that this is a team problem, or a team's problem, not a player problem. The players would theoretically be interested in this. That they're not the ones theoretically pushing back on this. I don't know that it's been proposed. It'd be interesting to know if this has been proposed. But what makes the most sense to me from the outside, and I am fully admitting, like the schedule, the outside, I am very much on the outside. But it makes sense to have the draft and rookie camp. Rookie camp into OTAs. OTAs into a break. That's almost part of a ramp-up period because you're acclimating the rookies in rookie camp. Everybody's with the team, but everyone that wants to be there, it is organized team activities, but not mandatory. So not everybody is always there. But you hope that if you're not there, you're working out on your own. And then you have your vacation. You get a month, 6 weeks off, whatever the timing is. And then you come and you do, instead of mandatory minicamp, it's just an extra week of training camp. You can call it mandatory minicamp if you want, where it's a ramp-up period. A lot of walkthroughs, a lot of stretching, a lot of strength training, a lot of just getting you ready to get ready to play football. It's like when you do your workouts, you should be doing warm-ups, right? When the Packers practice, they have warm-ups first. Well, it's nice to not come like off the couch into doing that. You need to have proper nutrition. Maybe you want to have a little caffeine before. You want to get your body in a place where you're going to maximize that work. And mini camp could be that little, you have a little espresso shot, maybe some carbohydrates. Like that's what is prepping you to then do training camp, getting you ready to get ready. And that to me follows what we're seeing with the preseason stuff. And that if you were able to do that, if you could have a longer ramp up period, so no pads, or maybe shells, pads only, like shoulder pads only. So we're just doing thud, like no full everything. I don't know if that's feasible. This all has to be collectively bargained, but it's all the same number of practice days. So why not just change the schedule and move the minicamp? Like they're not working that hard in minicamp. It's a lot of walkthroughs. It's a lot of installs. And then you just get to take, like, part of the problem with training camp is guys are still swimming. And part of that is because the young guys had a month off and, they're in Cancun, and which they need, by the way. Your body needs that break. Your mind needs that break. Like that. This is their job. They get vacation too. To come back, and do I remember exactly what this hand signal meant? Or do I remember exactly what my read was in this formation? Do I remember exactly where I have to align it when the verbiage is this versus this? Remember when there's a lot of stuff you got to remember. And there is a mental strain that can lead to physical strain. So the schedule doesn't make sense. It seems like an easy fix to me. It makes sense for everybody involved, the coaches, the players, everybody. That way, you don't have to come. Like if you're going to mandatory minicamp, which, by the way, mandatory is in the word. You have to come, if you weren't at OTAs, you have to show up, like let's say you're Jair Alexander. You have to show up for a week and then leave again. What are we doing? How does that make sense? For practices you have to be at, which are after practices you don't have to be at. Why not just have the practices you don't have to be at, and then once it's you have to be there, that's just it. There's no leaving and coming back. There's no like, oh, I'm going to go on vacation now. No. Once you show up, you're showing up. It's basically like rookie orientation, but for players, it's like the first day of a new class, the first day of a new job. First couple of days on the job, it's I got to get my key card. I got to figure out how the CMS works. I got to figure out what this program is. I got to get my email set up. I got to get my login information. I got to get, security clearances and whatever. Like, why not? Why doesn't that make more sense? I don't know. And why can't they change it? I don't know. Tomorrow, we're going to have Jake Arthur from Locked On Colts join us to not do a crossover, but to give us, he'll be at Colts Packers joint practices. He'll be giving us the scoop. All the latest on Matthew Golden, the left tackle battle, some of these rookies. Let's hear about it. He's going to join us tomorrow on Locked On Packers. Follow me on the social medias. Follow the podcast on the social medias. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get podcasts. Subscribe over on our YouTube page so you can stay Locked On Packers.